Hello there. Today I'm here again to introduce a tasting that I made on a plane travelling with Emirates between Dubai and Brisbane in premium economy class. And there I got a chance to look at and taste all the three wines that were available to passengers flying premium economy. And the white wine was a wine from a producer called Gerard Bertrand, and it was his Cigalus Blanc, which is a Vin from 2023. Now, Gerard Bertrand is a highly regarded French winemaker from this region. He was originally from Corbière, but also interestingly was a former professional rugby player who played for his local team, Narbonne, and went on to captain State Francais in Paris, so playing at the highest level. When Gerard was 22, he ended up taking over his family domain, Domaine de Villemajou in Corbière, following the untimely death of his father, Georges, in a car accident. For a while, Gerard managed to combine the two careers, both winemaking and playing rugby, but he retired from rugby in 1994 to devote his time to winemaking, a profession in which he's been highly successful, transforming his family's domain, this single estate in Corbière, into a group of estates that is now one of the Languedoc-Roussillon area's leading producers. Gerard Bertrand has very much been at the forefront of change in this region, and it's a region that in the last 50 years has moved enormously from being a producer of high volumes of cheap, basic, everyday drinking wines to a region with a much more quality focused approach. And Gerard's approach has very much been to focus on farming organically, sustainably and biodynamically. It's fair to say he's been somewhat of a pioneer of biodynamic approaches in the Languedoc region. Gerard's success can be seen in the fact that he now owns 17 estates throughout this part of Mediterranean and southwest France, including the quite prestigious Chateau Hospitalet, which he acquired in 2002. And today he's joined by his children, both his daughter and his son are part of the business. And his overall approach to viticulture is very much the idea of trying to hand on a better planet to his successors. Now, Gerard acquired Domaine de Cigalus in 1995. It's near Narbonne, slightly to the northeast, in the Languedoc-Corbière region. And this estate has very much been the focus of Gerard's biodynamic approach. And it was here that he began his experiments with biodynamics on a few plots back in 2002. And by 2010, the entire of this 75-hectare estate was being farmed biodynamically and had gained certification from Demeter, the certification authority for that. Now, the estate here has a Mediterranean climate. It's sort of semi-arid with quite a temperate spring. It's warm and sunny during the growing season, resulting in relatively advanced ripeness in the grape varieties grown here. Now, the aridity of the climate due to the low rainfall here is advantageous for both organic and biodynamic cultivation. There doesn't tend to be a huge risk of fungal pressure. There are deep soils here that are largely calcareous and are quite good at holding water, but also the calcareous elements restrict vine vigour. The vines are planted quite densely here for a Languedoc property at about 5,000 vines per hectare, but still yields are relatively low at about 25 hectolitres per hectare. The approach here is not only biodynamic, but also they have organic certification from an organisation called AB. But I should emphasise the ideas of biodynamics go further than simply achieving natural purity. The idea of biodynamics is to harness the energy and the life forces of the planet to actually enhance the growing environment. And as a result, operations in the vineyard, things like ploughing, pruning, are all done in relation to a biodynamic calendar, which is governed by the positioning of the moon and the sun. And all this is believed to help give the vine better balance and so to produce better fruit. They stress the fact here that planting was done with top quality clones. I've mentioned the planting density of 5,000 vines per hectare, and training is done to a high vertical hedge to try and make sure that there's as much sunlight inception as possible for the vines by exposing as large a leaf canopy to the sun as possible. I've mentioned the low yields, and the other thing they stress about quality is that when it comes to establishing harvest dates, the ripeness of each plot is assessed individually and tasted on a daily basis to ensure that they're picked at optimum ripeness. Now, I knew the wine was a blend of Chardonnay, Viognier and Sauvignon Blanc, but I wasn't sure exactly in what proportions. The notes I've seen suggest that in general there's about 70 to 75% of Chardonnay in the blend, with the balance being made up with the more aromatic Viognier and Sauvignon Blanc. The grapes are hand harvested, they're gently pressed with a pneumatic press to give a nice clean juice that is then allowed to settle, and they then mention that 70% of the juice is run off into barrel to undergo fermentation in new French oak. And that does make me think, is that the Chardonnay that's doing that, and the more aromatic Viognier and Sauvignon Blanc are being fermented in stainless steel tanks with temperature control to ensure the aromatics are retained there. I haven't seen anything that confirms that, but it would make sense that they do it that way. Malolactic conversion is carried out on all the parcels, and the wine ages in barrel for between 7 and 8 months. And while it's in barrel, the lees are stirred up to help enhance the richness of the wine. And again, in line with operations coming in line with the lunar calendar, lee stirring goes on up until the spring equinox. The wine is then lightly fined and bottled. Another thing they mention is not only that the wine is served on Emirates, but also in Air France. And I took a look at the Wine Touch aggregated critic score, and currently this vintage has a score of 89 out of 100. Do watch the video that follows and see what you think. Hello there. I'm currently on Emirates A380 towards the beginning of a journey between Dubai and Brisbane on my way back to Auckland. Having looked previously at wines on Emirates business class and in economy class, I thought it would be fun to use my frequent flyer points to upgrade myself for this long leg of the trip to premium economy. And so I'm reviewing the 3 wines available on this trip for travellers in premium economy. So the white wine I have here is a little bit of a mystery. It's a wine called Cigalus Blanc. It's a wine from the Pays d'Oc in the 2023 vintage, and the producer is somebody called Gerard Bertrand. Now, if I remember correctly, Gerard Bertrand was a professional French rugby player who, on the untimely death of his father, finished his rugby career to go back and run the family wine domain, a domain that he's expanded substantially since then, and which he now runs with his children. So my sources of information for this are the Emirates menu card and the back label of the wine, and that gives me only limited information. Now, the menu card tells me this is a wine shaped by gentle oak, which I take to mean that either all or a portion of the wine has been fermented in new oak barrels. I'm not told the variety is concerned, so I'm going to have a stab at those and see if we can make an educated guess. But the other information you can see from the label is the fact that this is a wine that is organic, and it's certified by an organisation called Demeter as also being biodynamic, and labelling a wine as Vin Pays d'Oc doesn't narrow its origins down enormously. I do know, however, that Gerard Bertrand has properties in the Languedoc. I believe one of his prominent properties is in the Languedoc in La Clape, and Bertrand has earned himself a reputation for making good quality and good value for money wines from this previously somewhat overlooked region. So let's take a look at the wine, shall we? It's a medium yellow colour. It's not become too deep or dark yet. The wine is labelled as having 14.5% alcohol, so I was sort of expecting that it would more readily throw obvious tears in the glass. I think there are some tears there, but they seem a little reticent to form, given the fact that it's likely at least a proportion of the wine has been fermented in barrel and will have aged with its lees, which should give it a bit of richness, and given the wine's alcohol, I was expecting those tears to be a little more obvious. It is nice that one of the upshots of the upgrade from economy to premium economy is the fact that I actually have a glass to drink from this time. I'm not a great fan of stemless glasses personally. Firstly, you end up with finger marks all over the glass, and secondly, as you're holding the glass, you're actually warming the wine. So under ideal circumstances, I'd much prefer a glass with a stem. However, this is a huge improvement from the plastic cup I was tasting from in economy. So let's see what we make of the aroma, shall we? The aromas are relatively powerful, they're rich, there's quite a ripe, almost unctuous forward fruit. The character that to me is most obvious is a stone fruit note, like a high ripeness peach, one where it's so ripe that the stone just comes away from the flesh so easily. It's juicy peach, it's almost confected. It's quite well integrated notes of oak, which includes some quite obvious vanilla, some cedary note, and a touch of creamy leesiness. It's an overripe, almost sickly sweet note of peach that stands out. Now, one of the most likely varieties to make up a proportion of this wine would be Chardonnay, certainly given that the wine appears to be barrel fermented and has plenty of alcohol. I wouldn't be surprised to find Chardonnay producing a lot of the wine's structure. Local varieties that could be used to give body and richness: you might use Grenache Blanc, you might use Marsanne, you might use Roussanne. To give the wine some perfume, you might include some Viognier. A variety I think is highly likely to be in here is a variety called Roll, or as the Italians would call it, Vermentino, which is normally used to help increase the wine's acidity, to give it better balance in this warm climate. So let's have a taste, shall we? The palate is dry, and again there's an unctuous, rich peachiness dominating. I think maybe the oak comes out a little more on the palate than it does on the nose, and that's possibly the warmth of the alcohol sort of picking out the sweet notes of ginger, cinnamon, nutmeg, again vanilla, and there are nutty notes. I find myself salivating, and while I think the wine has passable acidity, I think actually some of that is to do with the structure of the wine and the fact that it's almost sort of slightly tannic. It's a relatively powerful wine. As I say, its label is 14.5% alcohol. The alcohol doesn't particularly seem unbalanced, but I think if the wine had a little more acidity, it would have a bit more definition, length, and from the finish. As it is at the moment, I don't think this is a wine that will particularly develop over time. I think the finish is rich, ripe, and a little clumsy, and for that reason I don't think this is a wine that's going to develop particularly over time, and is probably best drunk up now. Having said that, I think if you're a traveller who likes big, rich, oaky wines, I think this is a wine you'd really enjoy finding on the flight. Certainly I think the wine's pretty well made. It has concentration, it has complexity. If I had to mark this, I'd give it an 89 out of 100. I don't know what the Wine Searcher aggregated critic score is, and I certainly think it's an interesting wine to be served in this situation. It's increasing my opinion that Emirates are doing quite a good job of making as interesting a wine selection as possible on their flights. So thank you so much for watching. I do hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have, do please press the like button. That would be fantastic. If you'd like to watch more of these videos, do please subscribe to my YouTube channel. And if you do that, do also set yourself a notification so you can be alerted every time I publish a new tasting. If you have any friends you think might like to watch the video, do please feel free to pass it on. I would really appreciate your endorsement in that way. I will of course leave a link in the notes below to the Wine Searcher webpage for this vintage of this wine, so you can see if it's available in your market and at what price. You can also review other vintages that might be available if that's of interest. So thank you once again for taking the time to watch this video, and I do hope that maybe sometime in the near future you'll find the time to come back and join me for another video tasting. Until then, bye for now.